Premier, thank you so much for speaking to the Daily Aus.
Pleasure, Billy.
What do you think is the biggest issue facing young people today?
Well, I think obviously future of work is incredibly important, and we're looking at housing as a major challenge for many young people. And I've often said, we can't have an Australia that can't house its children, and we need to do everything we can to make housing more affordable, particularly when it comes to rent as well, and finding those protections for stability. And it's really important that we provide stability for people, and we've made a number of changes in that space to make a difference. But also, I also think home ownership is crucial. But also look into the future and making sure that we've got the best jobs possible and being ahead of the game there. And if you look to the future and you look to where the economy is going, we ensure that our young people have the best education and the best opportunities going forward.
You mentioned housing and education. You've just announced a savings fund for each child in New South Wales, which when they turn 18, they can use to access education and housing.
Yeah.
What's the pitch in 30 seconds?
Well, we want to make sure we set up our kids for future success. And if every child can earn up to $49,000 by the time they leave school and put that towards getting better education and also getting into the property market, what a great thing that will be. And I believe our responsibility is to make sure our children have much better opportunities than we have. And I think this fund will make a real difference.
A similar scheme exists in Canada, and that found that it benefited high-income families over low-income families. Do you expect similar results in New South Wales?
No, because we made a really important change here, and that is for families that are on family tax benefits from the Commonwealth Government. That what we do as part of that is put $200 in without a co-contribution. So for those families who are on low to middle incomes, they will only have to pay $4 a week, contribute $4 a week. Whereas if you're not on family tax benefits, you'll have to contribute $8 a week.
It's a fact, though, that the more money you put in, the more money the government will give you, though, right?
We do a co-contribution for everyone. So
but the more the person puts in,
yes, and that's why
the government will contribute.
That's right. But for those families who are from a lower socioeconomic background, we automatically put $200 in every year.
But there's a gap between the number of families that are on the family tax benefit and the ones who aren't on that, but still can't afford to make that $400 contribution.
Yes, but if you are on family tax benefits, and it's around 300,000 families across New South Wales, you won't have to make a contribution at all, and we will put $200 in.
I just want to be really clear. You don't see how this policy could deepen existing inequalities?
No, I think absolutely every child will be better off right across New South Wales.
But in terms of existing inequalities, will this policy deepen that?
No, I think it will make it much better.
Okay.
I think it'll make it much better because by helping families who have lesser means, by giving them an annual contribution of $200 without them having to put $1 in themselves, $200 from the government, that will ensure that our young people are set up for success.
Let's move on to housing. Well, this fund can't be used for renting a house.
Yep.
Most of our audience are renters. Yep. What is your government doing to ease the renting crisis?
Well, the first thing we did last year was ban rent bidding. And we saw this was happening at many open homes. So real estate agents can't play tenants off each other. So that's the first thing we changed. And then recently we've made an announcement that if we are re-elected, we'll move away from no-fault evictions and into reasonable grounds. So reasonable grounds will need to be provided. And the other change we made, which I think is important, is in relation to extending the lease period. So giving contracts which have 3 to 5 year leases, and that will create greater stability. And that works for both, I believe, homeowners, the landlords and tenants, because it provides them with an opportunity to discuss greater long-term leases. And I think that's incredibly important. And the other one is bond rollover. So making sure that if people are moving from their home, they don't have to go and save the money again. The bond that they've already paid can be used for their next home.
The Coalition has been in power for 12 years in New South Wales. What has it done to be proactive about the longer-term issue of housing supply?
A lot. We've built a lot of homes in New South Wales, and that's a good question because that's where you make the biggest impact. That's where you make the biggest impact. And the more we open up supply, the more we get rezonings done in a faster way, in a way that works, keeps the character of communities, but at the same time ensures we build the infrastructure, the public transport. By doing that, we'll build more homes and that provides greater
But
opportunity.
so what has the coalition government actually done to help that?
Built hundreds of thousands of homes, and our accelerated infrastructure fund has been crucial in doing that too. So that's kind of the smaller infrastructure, water, sewage, making sure that that's implemented and installed as quickly as possible. And we've led the way. I mean, if you look at the economy, particularly before the pandemic, construction was driving it. And that's important for jobs growth on the way through, but ultimately at the end, it's really important to get people into homes. And we've built more homes than ever before, but we've got to keep going in a way that also is supported by the public transport. And that's why if you look at, particularly Western Sydney, we continue to build those metro trains for the future. The more we build, then that leads to developers obviously opening up supply and building more homes.
I want to move to healthcare. When we asked our audience what was important to them, a lot said nurse to patient ratios. Most Australian jurisdictions have now either committed to or implemented mandatory nurse to patient ratios. Why not New South Wales?
Well, we've invested a lot in terms of our health system, and when it comes to nurses, we in the last budget put together a 10,000 extra nurses, doctors, allied health professionals, and we think the approach we take works. Now,
do you think nurses think that it works?
Well, there are different views, and I understand that there are different perspectives in relation to this, but ultimately we've got to do everything we can to ease the burden in our health system. And I'm very proud of the fact that New South Wales is the strongest health system in the country, and we don't have ratios. But what we've shown during the pandemic is that in terms of emergency presentations, we've been able to meet 77% of patients on time compared to 67% around the country. So our investments make a real difference. But going forward, we really want to look at how do we improve the health system. We've got to look at new ways of doing things. And at a national cabinet level, that's something that every state premier and chief minister is focused on working with the Commonwealth government on. But we need a better integration of the system. At the moment, you've got a federal health system that works against the state system. And one of the biggest challenges we face is people being able to access a GP when they need one. So we're taking on pharmacy reform, giving pharmacies a greater opportunity to issue scripts and medications and vaccinations, and at the same time setting up urgent care clinics, which is not really in our jurisdiction. I partnered with Dan Andrews, the Victorian Premier in this space, to set up 25 urgent care clinics, which means that families across New South Wales don't have to go to an emergency department.
I just want to stay on nurses. I know we're limited for time. You have a plan, as you laid out, to attract more nurses, but what are you doing to ensure that they stay there once they are there?
Well, we're doing a lot. I mean, nursing is such an important profession, and we have so many nurses who have done an incredible job during COVID. But the way that we've supported the health system ensures that there's less pressure on the New South Wales public health system than any other health system in the country, and we've seen that during the pandemic. And if you want to be a nurse, the best place to be a nurse is right here in New South Wales.
Let's move to education. A recent Productivity Commission report found that in the past 10 years, funding for the state's private schools is increasing at a faster rate than public schools. Why is that?
Well, what I can say about our investments in public education is it's been at a record high. But when you look at those figures, you've also got to look beneath them in terms of this particular investments we've made in our public education system in relation to tutoring. And we know, particularly during the pandemic, many of our kids were going backwards because they weren't having face-to-face learning. So we've put in a significant tutoring program to make sure none of our kids go backwards. And the Productivity Commission also said this is probably one of the key areas where we can drive better educational outcomes.
But why is the funding for private schools increasing at a faster rate than public schools?
Well, that's obviously that's a relationship between state funding and federal funding when it comes to independent schools. We predominantly fund state schools in the public system here in New South Wales, and we put record funding. And I'm very proud of the fact that New South Wales was the first state to sign up to Gonski and those Gonski changes. And we looked at all areas of government funding and made a significant investment into our public education system. And I'm very much focused on getting better outcomes in education, and that's exactly what we've done. And we've also led the way with our recent announcement, and once again working with Dan Andrews on making pre-kindergarten free for every child the year before school. That is, in terms of productivity, in terms of educational outcomes for our children, that is going to be a real game changer.
On education, if re-elected, will you give teachers a pay rise in line with inflation?
Well, we've got a fair and balanced approach here when it comes to wages. So we're offering a 6% increase over the next 2 years. That is, if you look around the country, that's leading the way. I think Victoria is about 1.5% per year, so 3% over two. And it's I want to give as many pay rises as I can. But when you're managing the state's budget and the state's finances, you've always got competing priorities. I think the approach we have is fair and balanced. We've also providing a new spot at a number of schools across New South Wales for rewarding excellence in teaching, which will be positions of over $150,000. So that's a very significant increase to attract the best and brightest into the profession. And we're also reducing the masters, the period of time it takes to study a master's from 2 years to 1 year. So we're looking at new and innovative ways of doing things. And I think that'll attract the best and brightest into teaching. And the other issue that teachers are faced as well is admin. There's so much time that teachers find is spent on admin. And I want teachers doing what they do best, and that's teaching. That's what they love doing. And we've got to ensure that they're not getting caught up in running basic admin when they want to be in the classroom teaching.
Let's move to the environment. It feels like every few months there's another natural disaster in the state. How are you preparing for the next natural disaster that will inevitably come?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. The first one is on emissions reduction, and I'm very proud of our action on climate change in that space. And we'll have a 70% reduction by 2035, and that's leading the country. And we're very proud of our record in that space. In fact, WWF just came out and said New South Wales is the gold standard when it comes to climate change policies. But natural disasters, you're right, and I've seen that firsthand as Premier. I've spent over a month over the last 12 months in flood-affected communities and seen firsthand the devastation that those flooding events caused, and many members of our community are still struggling and trying to get back on their feet. So one of the things we worked really hard on was the creation of a reconstruction authority. We can't keep doing things the same old way and rebuilding in the same old way. We need to do things differently, and that's why we are unlocking land in safer areas and making sure as we build back in a much stronger and more resilient way. Also, when it comes to infrastructure, and when we have damage to our roads and our bridges, we simply just put them back in the same way. I'm a strong supporter of betterment, so we actually put more money in than we would have otherwise done. But that's going to ensure in the long term our communities are in a much stronger place when the next natural disaster happens, because we are a country where there are floods, there are bushfires, and we need to make sure we don't just do the things that we've done in the past, because we'll just be in the same position next time.
I want to talk about vaping. You recently admitted that you have the occasional vape, and you also shared what your favourite flavour is. What message does that send to young people?
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say is you shouldn't smoke, and I've made that very clear. And when it comes to vaping, we've invested a lot in making sure those public health messages are loud and clear.
But is that undone by then the leader of the state saying that he vapes?
Well, no one's perfect. And I've found vaping occasionally has helped me get off cigarettes. You can in New South Wales with a prescription, and that's the right approach that we take here in New South Wales. But there's no doubt there's a challenge with many young people vaping, and we need to do everything we can to make sure those public health messages are very clear. And we certainly have that in New South Wales, and I'm very pleased that we've taken that approach.
Do you think that the health messaging is very clear, given how widely available and used they are?
Well, I think it's a problem. Vaping is a problem. Smoking cigarettes is a problem. And we need to make sure young people are very aware of the harm that causes.
So what are you doing to make sure that they are aware?
Well, we put a $12 million program together, public health messaging, and that's getting into schools. That's getting into public advertising so that young people particularly are aware of the dangers of smoking, of vaping, and that's incredibly important, because obviously our number one area is to make sure people's healthcare is looked after.
Lastly, in your eyes, what is the most important quality in a leader?
Conviction. Doing what you believe is the right thing to do. Standing up to vested interests. You get into politics to make a difference, and if you have strong values and you stick to them, I think that's the most important trait in a politician. You're always going to have competing interests. There'll always be different opinions, and it's one of the great aspects of being in politics. People don't always agree with you, and whether that's in the public, in the media, whether that's around the cabinet table. But ultimately, if you do what you believe is right and have the courage of your convictions, I think that is by far the most important trait.
How do you mark yourself out of 10 on conviction?
Well, that's for others. That's for others to apply, not me.
Premier, thank you so much for joining the Daily Aus.
Thanks, Billy.